Hi everyone, here's a quick tutorial on assessing and rating English language proficiency. We're going to be working with students for 3 days from Kanazawa Medical University, and it's a combination of medical students and perhaps 1 or 2 residents. And this will be the 7th or 8th year that we've been working with these people, and they're really a good group dedicated to learning how to master medical English. So we're really happy that you're going to be joining us working with this group. The goal is to provide a formative assessment of the learner's skills because we really want to find out how well they're speaking English, how well they're communicating, and your ratings will really help in the remediation process. So we really need your fair and expert judgments. And just a few words about rating communication and English proficiency. In ordinary conversation, humans are hardwired to understand each other by connecting the dots between verbal and nonverbal communication and the communication context. So even if someone we're talking with isn't making a lot of sense, our minds work in such a way to allow us to understand them. So your task is not to make those ordinary allowances and give them a higher rating than they deserve, but to analyze the speech patterns they're using and rate accordingly. So it'll help their English instructor and them to know what they really need to work on. So here are some general rules about scoring. First, you have to really score them on their merits and not the circumstances. So one thing that should not go into your rating is considering the fact that they were tired or they're nervous or they're trying hard and you feel bad for them. Give them the rating that they deserve. Again, this is going to help them in the long run. One thing I would highly recommend is before that you do your scoring, you refer back to the guide, because it's not a guide that you're familiar with. You're not using an English language proficiency rating every day perhaps, and therefore it's important to refamiliarize yourself with what the issues are. This is a common practice at the national board where I work because people forget, and so therefore we want you to pull the guide out, take a look at it, and if you have any questions before you actually do your scoring. So one thing it's important to do is to rate each dimension separately. And for example, the learners really may be able to pronounce individual words correctly. Perhaps they would rate a 4, but their grammar is poor. They can't put those words together in an understandable sentence, and it might take a lot of effort for you to understand what they're actually saying. So it's very important that you really consider each dimension and score separately, and avoid giving every candidate the same rating, like a 2 or a 3, because they are going to be different in the different dimensions. The 5 skills that we're going to be assessing are pronunciation, range of vocabulary, grammar, learner comprehension, and listener effort, and more about this in a second. We've got 4 different ratings that you can give for each one of the dimensions, which I'm going to explain in a second, but they go from low, fair, high to very high, which rates essentially how understandable or comprehensible are they to you. So as you'll see, the ratings really comprise a combination of lower and higher quality speaking skills. And so low comprehensibility means that they predominantly exhibit lower quality skills, and perhaps there are no or rare instances of higher quality, meaning that there might be some instances where they're speaking well, but overall, predominantly, their skills are pretty poor in whatever area you're rating. And you might be thinking to yourself, I'm trying, but mostly I can't seem to understand, or they don't seem to be understanding me. So these are the thoughts that might be going through your head. For fair comprehensibility, some lower quality speech and some higher quality speech, in which you might be thinking it's not totally unclear and it's not totally clear either. So it's about a 50-50 split between lower quality and higher quality speech. And in high comprehensibility, the higher quality speech gets greater and the lower quality speech gets lower. So it's mostly higher quality speech with some lower quality speech included. in which you'd be thinking to yourself, they were completely understandable, not perfect, but pretty understandable. And then finally, very high comprehensibility, in which it's predominantly higher quality with no or rare lower quality speech, where you'd think this is mostly clear, a few mistakes though, that's okay. Even us who speak English as our first language make some mistakes in ordinary conversation. So, just to take you through what you're going to be rating, the first one is pronunciation, or the ability to say or pronounce standard English words correctly. And a couple common mistakes that people made sometimes are breaking what we consider one-syllable words down into two syllables, like, for example, he drowned instead of he drowned. Or with Japanese people, using the letter L, pronouncing the L sound. So they might say something like, she's a lawyer, meaning that she's a lawyer. So pay attention to those kinds of pronunciation issues. Again, you might know what they're talking about, but you really have to evaluate how well they're pronouncing words in general. Really difficult to those kinds of pronunciation issues. Again, you might know what they're talking about, but you really have to evaluate how well they're pronouncing words in general. So with pronunciation, low comprehensibility would include students who are very difficult to understand, having a heavy accent, or a 2, fair comprehensibility, where the pronunciation problem sometimes limits your understanding and they make numerous errors. Or 3, high comprehensibility. It's accented English, of course, but they're understandable with a few errors. But 4 is very high comprehensibility, where they have no difficulty at all expressing themselves, or you have no difficulty at all understanding them, and they make rare or no errors. The next dimension is range of vocabulary, which I think this is in many ways the hardest one to judge, because you're only going to be seeing them for a short period of time, so it may be difficult for you to figure out whether their range of vocabulary or pool of words is large or small. So here's some ideas about how to score this. For one, low comprehensibility, it seems like they have a limited vocabulary, where they're using just maybe 30 words to get by for the entire encounter, where they also make frequent awkward or incorrect word choices. And fair comprehensibility, a somewhat limited range of vocabulary, some awkward or incorrect word choices. With high comprehensibility, a moderate range of vocabulary, and with a 4, very wide range of vocabulary, where they would really speak English like a native. Grammar, how words and their component parts combine to form understandable sentences. Here's some issues that will sometimes come up. One is word order. Instead of what brings you in today, what today you bring in. And because languages place subject, predicate, object in different places, it's understandable in one language but not in another if they're translating word for word. So you'll pay attention to word order. Or the mixing up of verb tense, the past, present, and future. So instead of saying, how are you feeling today, they may say, how was you feeling today? Or maybe they were talking about, how was you feeling yesterday? So they could be making multiple errors in a single sentence. What make it better or worse? So also commonly misused words. So instead of saying, are you able to breathe, they may say, are you able to breath? Or do you feel okay today, which would be correct. They may say something like, do you fall okay today? Grammar, in terms of low comprehensibility, where the grammar errors frequently limit your understanding of them. Or 2, fair comprehensibility, grammar errors sometimes limit your understandability. 3, high comprehensibility, few grammar errors. Or 4, rare grammar errors. And again, with 4, and with 1. There may be rare instances of good or bad quality, but they may get a 1 or a 4 rating as a result. Listener effort. How much effort does it take you to understand the learner? In many ways, this is kind of the sum total of what's above. It might be a combination of their pronunciation, range of vocabulary, and grammar skills that make it easy or difficult for you to understand them. So a 1 in low comprehensibility would mean that extensive listening effort is required, or would be, meaning that you might be really good at accents. You might be really good at understanding people with accents, and however, you would have to kind of pull back and say, I understand what they're saying. However, I also recognize that it would take extensive listening effort in order for anyone to understand them. And I grew up with a grandfather who I could barely understand, and it really kind of got me good at making a big effort to try to understand people. But I recognized that he really didn't have a great command of English. It took a lot of effort to try to figure out what he was talking about. Number 2, fair comprehensibility. Some listener effort is required or would be required. 3, minimal listening effort, or 4, no listening effort required at all. And again, you have to really make these ratings based upon your analysis of their speech and perhaps not your personal proficiency in understanding. So one way to think about this is that if you were a English as a second language teacher, you would be really good at understanding lots of accents, but you would also be recognizing when people were having problems expressing themselves. Learner comprehension of you, the SP. How well does the learner appear to understand you? Things to look for. Are they following the conversation, for example, by asking follow-up questions? Are they summarizing information accurately if they do summarize? Do they seem confused, for example, blank stares or long pauses between one question and another? So you might just look at them also, not only just listen to them, but also look at them and see, are they struggling to understand what you're saying? So low comprehension would be if extensive listening comprehension was an issue. 2, some listening comprehension errors on their part. 3, minimal speaking comprehension errors. And 4, no speaking comprehension errors. And the next step is, if we can secure videos from the last sessions, we'd like you to rate 1 or 2 sample videos, submit your scores ahead of time, and then we would discuss the scores at our live Zoom meeting. I'm not really sure if we're going to be able to get the videos. That's the plan. If not, we will be able to have an opportunity during our live meeting in a couple weeks to review the rubric and answer any of your questions. So with that, I want to thank you.